Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Education USA's Friday webinar in India. Thank you for joining us today. Today's session is about financing your studies. Before I introduce today's speaker, I would like to share some more information about who we are and what do we do. Education USA is a US Department of State supported body, and our mandate is to provide accurate, current, and comprehensive information to students who are looking to pursue their higher studies in the US. We have 7 advising centers in India and over 400 worldwide. For more information, please visit www.educationusa.state.gov website. In our efforts to reach out to more students, we conduct weekly virtual information sessions every Friday at 4 p.m. We invite you and your friends to join us every Friday for these sessions, where you can learn more about the different aspects of higher studies in the US. For today's session, our speaker is the Coordinator of International Admissions at Eastern Michigan University, Danielle. Danielle, good morning and welcome to the Friday webinar. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and presenting the session, especially so early in the morning.
Certainly. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you at the session, Daniel. Towards the end of this session, we would have a question answer round and I recommend you to keep your questions till the end. Daniel, we're ready to begin and the floor is all yours.
Great, thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I'm happy to be here today to meet with all of you. I've had the chance to travel to the Education USA office in India previously, and so it's great to be back, albeit an electronic platform, to meet with all of these students. My name, as was introduced, is Danielle Kanclerz, and I'm a representative from Eastern Michigan University's International Admissions Office. I'm here today to provide you with some information on how to locate funding opportunities to study in the United States. Because earning a degree abroad can be quite expensive, I'll provide you with some tips on where to locate scholarships, loans, and work opportunities that might lower your overall cost of attendance. And as we said, at the end, I'll hold a brief question and answer. If you have a question and you're afraid you might forget it, feel free to type it into the chat box and we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. But again, thank you all for being here today. So to get started, I want to make sure we're all on the same page by providing you with information on the financial requirements that you must meet to study in the United States. To be issued an I-20 document and apply for your student visa, universities require that you submit evidence of funding for 1 year's study and living expenses. This amount is determined by individual universities, but showing financial documentation is actually a government-imposed requirement. So I know sometimes students will reach out to our office and ask if there's any way we can waive this requirement for them. And unfortunately, this is something the government requires that all universities have students demonstrate. And then it's also something you will need to demonstrate in your visa interview. The actual amount that you'll need to show will vary based on the university's tuition and room and board costs. Most universities will also include estimates for books and health insurance in these figures. This amount may also be adjusted if you locate additional funding opportunities, such as scholarships, grants, or loans through the actual institution. When applying to a university, you'll want to ask how to show your financial proof. Some universities will require original documents be sent to them via postal mail, while others may accept scanned copies. Some universities will require liquid funds in a checking, savings, or money market account, and others will accept loan paperwork, property declarations, etc. Most universities will not issue an I-20 until this funding has been verified. So it's important that you understand each university that you're applying to, each of their specific requirements. Because the policies at each school may differ, it's also important to ask each university about their process. Otherwise, you could potentially risk not being accepted to study at their institution or having your visa denied once you get to the visa interview process. So now that we all have a base understanding of the financial requirement, I want to go into some of the funding opportunities. Today we'll talk about university scholarships, graduate assistantships, teaching assistantships, working on campus, financial aid, external scholarships, and educational loans. American students are often told to find the best fit university for them and then think about the cost. And there's no reason that international students can't do the same. Knowing that you can meet the admission requirements of a university, that you'll be comfortable in the location where they're located, and that they offer your major or program of study are the three most important aspects of this process. Once you have a few universities that meet these criteria, you'll want to begin searching their websites for international student scholarships. These might be located on a page within the financial aid website or directly on the International Office's webpage. Make sure to read the eligibility guidelines. It's important to note whether or not the scholarships are limited to certain countries or academic programs of study, if they require certain test scores or marks, or if they have some other limitations placed on them. If you can't determine what the eligibility criteria for a scholarship is, reach out to the university and ask. Any university should have a contact email address or phone number that you can reach out to for this information. At Eastern Michigan University, we offer a few different international student scholarships. To give you all an idea of what you can look for at various institutions in the country, I'd like to highlight these for a moment. Our National Scholars Program is available to undergraduate and graduate level students who meet certain academic standards. This scholarship program is only available to students earning their first degree at that level. For example, an undergraduate student would need to be working toward their first bachelor's degree and have earned a 2.75 GPA or higher on their high school marks. Most universities will do this GPA calculation in their office, but you can use calculators online to get a rough idea of what your grade point average would be in the U.S. system. In the case of a student transferring from another university, they would need to have earned a 2.75 grade point average or higher on all of their university coursework for this scholarship. And then finally, for graduate students to qualify for the National Scholars Program, they must have earned a 3.6 grade point average or higher on their bachelor's degree coursework and be working toward their first master's degree. So as I listed those requirements, you can see that it's certainly more competitive typically at the graduate, the master's degree level to obtain scholarship opportunities. For the undergraduate students, we have a much lower GPA requirement for this scholarship, and about 90% of our students actually earn it at the undergraduate level. But as I said, it's a 3.6 GPA at the master's level, and that's very similar to other institutions. If they're able to offer international scholarships, it is more likely for that funding to be available at the undergraduate level. Our National Scholars Program covers the difference between resident and non-resident tuition though, which is a value of $16,500 US for undergraduate students and $8,100 for graduate students, which can make a big difference when it comes to affording an education in the USA. So that's something to keep in mind. You may not find scholarships at all institutions that offer this difference between in-state and out-of-state, resident, non-resident, but they're going to have some kind of opportunity. We also have an additional scholarship program for students working on a master's degree. It's called the Student Success Program. And these students are those who may not have qualified for that National Scholars Program, but have still done well academically with a 3.2 to a 3.59 grade point average. And that award, while not worth quite as much, is still amounting to $3,100 per year. So as I said, you always want to look at the eligibility criteria for scholarships, but you'll also want to examine if these scholarships require you to perform at a certain level once you're at that institution. All of our scholarships do have this additional criteria that students must meet while they're on campus. For most of our scholarships, students must maintain a 2.75 grade point average or higher on their coursework at Eastern. So it's important to know if the scholarship is vital to your ability to attend the university, you'll want to be aware of this criteria and ask any questions you find necessary to ensure that you're maintaining your scholarship. Students who choose to apply to private universities, we are a public university, Eastern Michigan University, but if students are applying to private universities, you might find that some of these schools offer full tuition scholarships for competitive applicants. It's important to know that when I say competitive applicants, I definitely mean the top of that school's applicant pool. It's important to be realistic when looking at scholarship opportunities. As an international student, the scholarships offered to a domestic student at an institution will be most likely very different than those offered to an international student. So look into those criteria, pay attention to what standards you need to meet, and if a certain number of scholarships are limited each given year, you'll want to make note of that as well. While our scholarships at Eastern actually don't require an additional application, we will look at all students at the time of admission to see if they qualify. It is important to note that many universities do require this separate application, and you'll want to note the deadlines and submission instructions for schools that require this. Additionally, to find other scholarship opportunities, you'll want to research the program of study that you're applying to. Some programs will offer additional scholarship opportunities, especially if alumni or local foundations have donated funds for these purposes. A good start to locating these opportunities is reviewing the program's website, but it may also be necessary to contact specific departments. It's possible that these awards may only be available to graduate or continuing students, but it never hurts to ask. Finally, if you're interested in competing in athletics at the university of your choice, you could look into the potential for receiving an athletic award or scholarship. Often these awards, though, are given to top athletes being recruited for a particular team, but it's still possible at times to obtain funding if you contact the coach directly. American universities are often members of the NCAA, which is the most competitive athletic association in the country, or the NAIA, which is an organization often a member of smaller schools. The NCAA offers 3 divisions that schools can compete in. Only Division I and II can offer athletic scholarships. However, the NAIA, which as I said is a bit smaller institutions that tend to participate, can offer scholarships to athletes based on the availability of funding at that particular school. So just as a note, if you are interested in athletics, but you haven't been contacted by the coach at a particular university, fill out a prospective athlete questionnaire, typically located on the institution's website, and provide information on your specific stats. But keep in mind, it's much easier to receive funding if it's an NAIA university, because it's going to be a smaller pool of students typically looking for these funds. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about graduate assistantships. Graduate assistantships are often offered by universities to fill support roles on the university's campus with qualified graduate students. These positions can be housed within academic or administrative departments, and in exchange for working in the designated position, students often receive partial or full tuition benefits that cover their study at the university, as well as a living stipend to assist the student with housing and meal costs. Depending on the university, each assistantship may have different terms of compensation, and the amount of work may vary. Students holding F1 visas are not permitted to work more than 20 hours per week on campus during the school year. So this is often the maximum number of hours worked as part of an assistantship. If interested in obtaining an assistantship at your chosen university, it's important to start the process early. You'll want to locate information on applying to assistantships on the university's website. Some schools may have a centralized job board, like we do at Eastern, that students can use to identify openings across campus. In other cases, you may need to reach out to departments directly to learn of their individual openings. In either case, it's often a good idea to reach out to the department directly as well to build connections with the faculty and establish your interest in their position. Most assistantship positions are considered competitive in nature, so in addition to completing the designated application process, it may be necessary to interview for the position and demonstrate prior work or academic experience in the particular area of interest. Some schools will also require that you're fully admitted to your academic program before you can begin applying for assistantship opportunities. And some may even require you to have attended the university for a certain period of time before you're eligible. So if you're offered an assistantship, you'll want to make sure to review the terms of your position with the department. As each position is different, it's important to ask questions such as, how will I be compensated? Is my tuition fully covered? Are there limits on how many credits are covered per semester? And what is that cost for any additional credits? Is a stipend provided in addition to a tuition benefit? Is my assistantship for just one or multiple semesters? And how many hours are you expected to work per week and at what times? It's good practice to request an offer letter from your department that outlines this information. You might also need to provide this offer letter to your university's international office for their records. If receiving the position before being issued your I-20 document from the institution, it's possible that the position could be listed on your I-20 document and the amount of finances that you're required to show actually reduced. So slightly lesser known, but I think a lot of students actually We'll sometimes get teaching assistantships confused with graduate assistantships, and they are relatively similar. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about this as well. They are another work opportunity for graduate students within the campus community. Students in these positions actually assist faculty directly with instructional responsibilities. So this could be leading tutorials, giving lectures, or grading exams and research papers. The structure of the position and the dearth of the responsibilities will vary based on the particular university's policies, but could even involve teaching an introductory level undergraduate course. And at some institutions, you might be teaching a couple. These positions aren't offered at all universities and are more likely to be found at the larger public research institutions with sizable graduate programs. Eastern Michigan University actually does not offer teaching assistantships on our campus because we have faculty strictly teaching our undergraduate courses. So as you'll see, it does vary from institution to institution, but students interested in obtaining these positions would follow a similar formula to those seeking graduate assistantships. You'll want to determine the university's policies on the positions and whether there's a centralized job board to research opportunities. And then some universities may even advertise these openings at the time of application. Once offered a teaching assistantship position, you'll want to determine again what the terms of that position are through communication with the department or maybe an official offer letter. And then you'll also want to make sure to provide that documentation to the institution's international office. Other opportunities to work on campus, or maybe if you don't qualify for a graduate assistantship or teaching assistantship, you might still have that opportunity to obtain a part-time position on campus. When searching for general student positions, though, it's important to know the difference between federal work-study and general campus jobs. Federal work-study is a program funded by the U.S. government to assist students who demonstrate financial need with obtaining positions on their university campus to earn money toward their educational expenses. Eligibility for these positions and the amount of funding available to each student is determined by completing a form called the FAFSA, which is a free application for financial aid. But this application is only available to U.S. citizens and permanent residents. So the majority of you probably will not qualify for this. So it's important to know if you're looking at a position that says you must have federal work study, you most likely cannot apply for that position. However, international and graduate students might be eligible for other campus jobs. You'll just need to make sure that they don't have this designation. Compensation for these jobs comes in the form of a direct paycheck, which means you'll need to pay taxes on your earnings. Typically, the International Student Office can help you in determining how to file your taxes each year. Students in the U.S. on an F1 student visa are permitted to work on their campus for a maximum of 20 hours per week during the school year. And you should also be able to obtain any additional restrictions relevant to employment on your campus from the university's international office. Because off-campus employment is not permitted to students on F1 student visas, except for in extenuating circumstances, this is often international students' only option when it comes to employment in the U.S. during their studies. I'm sure many of you have heard of programs such as CPT and OPT. These are, of course, still available, but traditionally CPT students that are doing the curricular practical training during their studies, maybe doing that more on a volunteer basis. And then OPT, optional practical training, is something that does not occur until after you've graduated with your degree. So working on campus can be a good opportunity while you're still in your academic program. It is important to note that student jobs on campus are often limited by the university budget. So you'll want to inquire if positions are open to only federal work-study students. A number of positions on campuses are typically within actual administrative offices to assist with general tasks, and they'll typically pay around minimum wage in the U.S. with increases based on prior qualifications or performance in the position. To give you all an idea, our minimum wage here in the state of Michigan is just under $9 an hour right now. These positions can be an opportunity to gain experience in your field or area of interest if a relevant position is found. And some universities may limit general student positions on campus to undergraduate students. So if you are pursuing a master's degree, it's important to know that you should ask the hiring manager if this is a limitation on any given position. To find these positions, determine if your university offers a campus job fair or maintains a centralized job posting website. At Eastern, we have a website called Handshake, where all of these positions would be listed. And throughout the year, as offices need to hire additional staff, they're added to that website. At some institutions, though, particularly those that are smaller, you may need to go to individual departments and inquire about their hiring status. That's why typically the campus job fair is a great opportunity to see all of these offices at once and learn what they're looking for in a candidate. All right, so another route to obtain additional funding for your studies is to see if your university offers need-based financial aid for international students. While this is not necessarily a common practice, some private or highly selective universities will offer this to qualified students. If a university does offer financial aid, chances are you'll need to fill out paperwork in addition to the financial documents required for the I-20 document to demonstrate your family's income and living expenses. What a university requires you to submit for this process is completely at their discretion, but may include pay stubs, bank statements, tuition statements for any siblings that are also in school, property or land valuation, or something additional. To determine if your university offers need-based financial aid, you'll want to reach out to the international or financial aid offices. It's important to note that you're an international student when you're doing this outreach because many universities will offer a different type of financial aid to domestic students. If the university indicates they do offer international student need-based aid, ask what percentage of international students actually receive this aid and then how to apply. This will allow you to be realistic about the opportunities available to you. Offices might also be able to give you advice on submitting specific documentation or point you in the direction of a more formal application process. This financial aid may be offered in the form of grants and scholarships, which you don't need to pay back, or loans, which you will. The terms of a loan will vary greatly depending on whether a cosigner is required or if the university outsources loan packaging. While any financial aid offered to you should be notated on the I-20 document, It's also worthwhile to ask the university if a financial aid offering such as this would reduce the amount of finances that you would need to show for your student visa. To get an idea of what schools might offer financial aid for international students, you can review the College Board's Common Application for Financial Aid at the website you see on the slide. Over 300 universities participate in their Common Application and offer some percentage of their international student population a need-based financial aid package. Often, these packages, though, will not fully cover your tuition and living expenses, so the school may still have a minimum amount that you'll need to show in financials to fund your education. So outside scholarships are another funding option that you can explore once you've exhausted the opportunities that would be available through a specific university. A large benefit to these outside scholarships is that you should be able to apply them to any university that admits you, as long as the scholarship does not specify that it's only good for specific programs or schools. It's a good idea, though, to start searching for scholarships in your local area rather than immediately turning to the internet. You'll want to brainstorm with friends or relatives. Do you know of any scholarship programs through the country's Ministry of Education? Do you or your parents' employers offer any scholarships for international study? Are you eligible for any Fulbright, USAID, U.S. Department of State, or Institute for International Education programs? Because the scholarship opportunities that you're able to locate might not always be published online, it's important to actually get out within your local community and ask questions. Depending on the relationship you have with your local community, a local business or other entity might even create a new scholarship or sponsorship program based on your request. It probably won't fund the entirety of your studies, but it doesn't hurt to ask. You can also check with EducationUSA. They often, more even so than the universities you're applying to, will be aware of those local opportunities or any special programs that might be present in your area. Once you've exhausted the opportunities available to you at home, you can begin your search on the internet. Keep in mind that most scholarship programs listed online will be very competitive and have a very large applicant pool than any local opportunities, just because everyone can access them. Start with searching for any foundation programs that might be relevant to you based on your country of residence. For example, the Aga Khan Foundation offers a limited number of scholarships each year for graduate study to outstanding students from developing countries. These foundation scholarships consist of 50% grants and 50% loans, the latter part which is paid back after the completion of your studies. By searching for programs like this one, you may be able to obtain additional funding for your studies, but know that a lot of these programs also have early deadlines, so you'll need to start your search well in advance. You can also conduct searches on scholarship websites with personalized search engines that weed through a database of awards for those that match your particular background. Some popular websites that offer this include International Scholarships, FastWeb, College Week Live, Scholars for Dev, and Brokerfish. You'll just want to be careful of scams as you're searching for these scholarship opportunities. You should never be asked to pay to apply for a scholarship or to better your chances. So after you've looked into the university's scholarship and financial aid opportunities, you've looked into any external scholarships, of course, educational loans could be an opportunity to cover these expenses. Keep in mind You'll be required to pay back these loans after completing your studies based on the loan's specific terms. Some loans may accumulate interest while you're studying or need to be paid back within a certain time frame. It's also important to know if you're looking at loans from a secondary country, you'll want to make sure you're factoring in their currency and the fact that currency situations could change while you're in school before you take out any loans. The best way to obtain a loan, though, is typically to work with banks or the government in your country of residence. Many loan opportunities within the United States will require that international students provide a U.S. permanent resident or citizen as a cosigner, which means that you would need a friend or relative under that status to sign and take responsibility for your loan. Because loans that default, which means that you didn't pay back the loan on time or by following the specific terms, can affect both your and the cosigner's credit here in the United States, it can be difficult to find a willing cosigner. If you do have a cosigner with United States permanent residency or citizenship, you can look into loan search engines such as the International Financial Aid and College Scholarship Search, or through specific banks like Wells Fargo. If you're unable to find a cosigner, you can look towards programs such as the Global Student Loan Corporation that will supply loans to international students as long as they're 18 or older. Because loans need to be paid back, it's best to research all of the other funding opportunities that we've discussed before resorting to this route for funding your education in the United States. So those were the majority of the financial kind of funding opportunities that I wanted to discuss today. For any of you that are interested in learning more about the opportunities available for you at Eastern Michigan University, I would like to encourage you to visit our website. Our international homepage actually links to our online catalog, which has a list of over 300 programs that we offer at the undergraduate and graduate levels. And you can also begin your application directly from this website. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to funding your studies in the United States is the cost of applying to different universities. Most universities will have a cost between $25 and $100 US to apply, with some having even higher application costs for international students specifically. However, because all of you attended our presentation today, I would like to offer you an application fee waiver code to apply to Eastern Michigan University for free. This code is INTL and should be entered into the application in capital letters. If anyone would like that code in writing, feel free to follow up with me via email after the presentation. Other costs that are included in the application process to a university may be things such as submitting your English proficiency or other exam scores. Graduate programs might require the GRE or GMAT, and the score submission for these programs is going to come at an additional cost. And most universities will require those scores come directly from the testing agency. So it's not possible to just send your own score report. Eastern Michigan University, as well as some other institutions, may also require anyone with international university level coursework to obtain a transcript evaluation from a third-party provider, which would mean that you would have to pay a fee to that company to evaluate your actual coursework and determine a U.S. grade point average. That fee, depending on the organization, could range from $160 to $250 US. However, that would typically be a one-time cost that you could use for each institution you were applying for. If admitted to a U.S. university, you'll also incur costs from the U.S. government when applying for your student visa through what's called the SEVIS database. So it's just important to keep these in mind, because even if you're one of the lucky few who get a 100% tuition scholarship, there are still going to be additional costs that you'll incur during the application and arrival process. So that's what I have for you all today. If you have any questions regarding what we discussed or opportunities available for you at Eastern Michigan University, I can certainly address those now. Or if you're short on time or would like to follow up later, I do have my email address and our phone number on the screen right now. We, of course, also have Facebook and Twitter where you can learn more about us. And we have a Skype account where you can kind of save on some of those calling fees as well if you'd prefer to contact us that way. So if anyone has any questions now, if you'd like to type them in your chat box, I can certainly work to address what I can. It is important to know that in kind of this financial process, though, all universities are going to handle things slightly different. All right, so we have our first question. Let's see. The question is, are there any fee waivers for undergraduate students? Certainly that fee waiver code that I gave you just a few moments ago, that works for undergraduate and graduate applicants at Eastern Michigan University. I'll type that code into the chat box so that you all have it, but it's INTL in all caps. All right, next question. What are the on-campus jobs offered for undergraduate students? Typically, jobs that you're going to find on campus will include things such as, working in the international office, maybe answering questions from prospective students such as yourself. You'll also run into job opportunities such as working in dining services, or working maybe in an academic department. There's a lot of variation kind of in the opportunities that are available on any given campus. I know back when I was earning my bachelor's degree, I actually worked in the university's library, helping to shelve books and check out books for other students. So it's really kind of the world is your oyster when it comes to job offerings on campus. It's just important to make sure to reach out to that hiring manager and find out if there are any limitations on the job, like needing to have that federal work study that we talked about. Okay, our next question, does EMU offer pre-med courses? So our university, Eastern Michigan University, we are actually very large in the sciences. So we do offer a pre-med course. Most students at Eastern Michigan University will actually pursue a degree in biology or chemistry if they're interested in pre-medical studies. This allows you to get the background that you would need to apply to a medical program, but you'll also have other opportunities available to you, and you'll be able to kind of take the pre-professional track, where you'll get the necessary coursework, but also be able to work closely with an advisor on different opportunities that might be available for you in the medical field. I want to be completely honest, it is very difficult for international students to pursue medical studies in the U.S. We offer 4-year programs at the bachelor's level in these pre-medical studies. But then when it comes to applying to an actual medical school, many students need to show all of their funding before they can be considered for admission. And acceptance rates are very low for medical school. So keep that in mind if your interest is in becoming a doctor. There are other opportunities in the medical world that might not be doctor status, but still have that same amount of prestige. Physician assistant programs are very popular in that regard. All right, great. You guys are asking a lot of good questions. Our next question, how to convert a percentage into a 4.0 GPA. Because this type of conversion is going to be based on the individual institution's kind of criteria, some schools will look at all of your courses, some may only look at the core courses. It's important to know that, yes, searching online, you'll be able to find conversion websites. There's a number of them out there. I wouldn't say that any one is better than another. EducationUSA could also assist you in kind of determining a rough idea of what your grade point average would be. But typically, looking at those websites, you'll get an idea of kind of the scale of the percentages and then what GPA that actually equates to. So I would recommend, if you're interested in finding this out, do a quick Google search and test out a couple different websites, but know that what the institution you actually apply to determines to be your grade point average might be slightly different. All right, our next question. So earlier in the presentation, I mentioned highly selective institutions. And so what I meant by that is highly selective institutions are ones that have a very low acceptance rate. So schools that immediately come to mind are, for example, those in the Ivy League system or private universities that might accept fewer than 40% of their students. Typically, the more selective an institution, a private institution is, the more likely they are to be able to dedicate funding specifically to students that are admitted to their institution. And there are lists available online that you can search and find that would indicate institutions who fill 100% of an applicant's need. It's important to know, though, that a lot of these lists are actually based on domestic students. While many institutions will not consider your financial situation in admission, some selective institutions do actually look at this because they want to make sure if they can't provide you with funding, that you'll still be able to come should they admit you. To identify these institutions, a good way to do it would be to Google search acceptance rates on the institution. While these might be provided on the website, I would recommend actually looking for a third-party source to find these acceptance rates. And as always, when you're doing research, look at a couple different sources and compare the information that you're finding. Some of it might be a few years outdated, so you'll want to search around a bit to actually find the most current information available. And then to determine if those institutions have funding, you could look at the website we discussed earlier through the College Board to see if the school offers need-based financial opportunities. And you could also look on the institution's website specifically to determine if they have any scholarships that are available to international students. All right, our next question. Why are more scholarships offered for students in the fall than students in the spring? This is a great question. Many programs in the United States start in the fall. Not all institutions will even admit students for that spring semester because you'd be starting in the middle of the year. So typically, institutions will kind of exhaust their scholarship funding in that fall semester because they want to bring in as many students as possible and make it as affordable as possible for those students too. So it's important to know when you're applying that that fall semester is typically the semester where the majority of new students are going to start and when the majority of scholarships will be offered. And then the spring semester, it might also be known as the winter semester at some institutions, but it typically starts in January or February. That semester, while some opportunities might still be available, it's probably going to be based on funding and how much of those funds were used in the fall. At Eastern, we're luckily able to have equal scholarship opportunities in both semesters, but that is the case at most institutions, that they will kind of dedicate those funds towards the fall. All right. How can American citizens residing in India take advantage of in-state tuition and get residency at EMU? So typically at most institutions, you're going to be looked at based on where you're currently residing when it comes to in-state tuition qualifications. At Eastern Michigan University, however, American citizens, even if they're residing in India, will always receive in-state tuition. It's important to note on your application that you are a U.S. citizen, and it's also important to know that your admission will be based on your marks from in India. However, you would be considered for in-state tuition, and then you would also be considered for all of our domestic scholarship opportunities. So if you are a U.S. citizen, while we don't require the ACT or SAT for undergraduate admission for our international students, if you're a U.S. citizen, you want to submit those exams because that's how they decide our domestic scholarships. If you are a U.S. citizen and you have more questions about this, definitely reach out to me and I can answer them. There's a bunch of different scholarship kind of criteria that are specific to U.S. citizens, so I don't want to spend too much time on it today, but definitely just let me know if you're in this situation. Okay, a question on visas. With a 5 to 6 years of study gap, does it hurt the chances of getting the F1 visa? And if you show funding for 2 years, how would you show funding for the rest? So for visas to the United States, typically study gaps are not necessarily going to hurt your chances. But the key to your visa interview and obtaining that student visa is explaining your specific situation and demonstrating that you're interested in coming to the U.S. for an education and how you plan to use that education to advance your home country. Many visa officers want to look and make sure that you're interested in coming for an education, not that you're just trying to get into the country to work. They want to make sure, because you're applying for a student visa, that that's your actual intent. And then in terms of the funding documentation, it's a requirement for both institutions and for the visa interview that you show funding for 1 year's worth of tuition and living expenses. It's great if you can show funding for multiple years, but that is not technically required to be issued your student visa. So you'll want to make sure, of course, that you can pay for all of your years of study, but you don't need to have all of those years of study funded up front. If, for example, your parents are sponsoring your studies or another relative and they're earning funds while you're in university, they of course might not have all of those up front, and that's okay. As long as you have a plan in place to pay your tuition bill, it's okay to only show that 1 year up front. Okay? So for students that are non-resident students, to become eligible for resident fees, it's going to vary based on the individual institution. The only way that students at Eastern Michigan University can earn in-state resident tuition is if they qualify for one of our available scholarship opportunities. Moving to the United States to begin your studies and being in the U.S. for a certain period of time would not affect your residency. However, this is different based on institution. So if you have a list of schools that you're looking at, I would recommend reaching out to each of them individually to determine their policy on this. Recently, I have heard of some institutions that once you are in the state for 1 year, they would consider you for that in-state scholarship rate. However, there might be certain criteria regarding your actual student visa for this as well. So definitely reach out to those schools, but at EMU, you would not be eligible for resident fees unless you received a scholarship that covered that difference. All right, how much does the SAT and other test scores affect our college applications? So this is also going to be different at each school. At EMU, you do not need to submit the SAT or ACT for our bachelor's degree application. For students applying, though, from out of the country, you will need to submit an English proficiency score, and this will definitely affect your admission. You want to make sure that you can demonstrate the minimum required score on an English proficiency exam. Otherwise, you would need to take English language training at that institution. This is another requirement that's imposed by the federal government. To admit you to an academic program, you must demonstrate that English proficiency. At other institutions, though, that require the SAT or ACT, of course, a significant weight is going to be placed on these exams in your application decision process. Typically, these will be combined with your marks from high school to actually make that decision, though. So whether they look at them equally or they favor maybe marks over test scores, most institutions do realize that the SAT and ACT were started as U.S. examinations and realize that taking these from outside of the country might demonstrate your academic abilities slightly different than a U.S. citizen who's kind of been taught this curriculum taking them. All right. So a question about applying. If you're finishing high school in March 2019 and want to immediately start an undergraduate program, I would recommend applying, depending on the institutions you're looking at, you're going to want to apply for the fall 2019 semester. Depending on the individual school, that semester might start in August or September of that year. And in regard to application deadlines, these are going to differ from each school, but you'll most likely want to look at applying for that fall 2019 semester in October or November of 2018. That way you receive full consideration for not only admission, but for these scholarship opportunities. And since you specifically mentioned that you are a U.S. citizen, I would also recommend directly reaching out to those institutions to determine if it's required that you take the ACT or SAT, and if it's not required, if it would be beneficial to you to take it. Similar to what I said at EMU, while you're not going to need to submit it, you might want to, just to ensure that you're considered for all available scholarships. While some universities will have a summer semester that would start in May or June of that same year that you graduate, I would not recommend applying to start in that semester because many institutions, the campuses are quite quiet in the summer, and you won't have that same opportunity to adjust and participate in orientation programs that you might have had you started in the fall or even the winter semester, winter, spring, starting in January or February. Okay, so last question. I have a question about ACT or SAT. And then students that have more questions, feel free to email me and I can follow up with you directly. You can also give us a call if that's easier for you. So a question about the SAT score as required for a business or economics course. This is going to vary so much based on the individual institution. So like I said, we don't require the SAT. Schools that do, it's all going to be based on what the other applicants are submitting. So when you're looking at that data on acceptance rates at any given institution, you should also be able to see averages regarding SAT and ACT scores. Take a look at these averages, see if you're somewhere in that range. Definitely, if you're above that average, that's going to be better for you in the admission process. All right, great. So thank you all for coming today. I'm sorry I didn't get to all of the questions, but please follow up with me and I will help you to kind of get everything answered so you can start working on your applications.
Thank you, Danielle. This was a really, really informative session. Thank you for everyone for logging in today.
Danielle, this was a really, really informative session.
Uh, Please log in at every Friday at 4 p.m. for more such informative sessions. Thank you all.
Thank you all.